Safari.
Okay, so 48A, we've got a few lines down there. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. So the Mishnah had given like a minimum standard for providing a funeral for one's wife. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, even a poor person has to provide at least, I think, 2 flutes for like the dirges and one wailing woman. So Michlal the Tanakama Savar Hani Lo. So if Rabbi Yehuda had to say that, so sounds like the Tanakhama does not have this minimum. Hey, Chidame, what are we talking about? Idorcha, if that's the custom in the in her family, my Tama the Tanakhama Yamar. So why wouldn't the Tanakhama say that you have to go by the wife's family's custom? She's the one that's dead after all. It's her funeral. And if it's not her family's custom, my Tama Rabbi Yehuda. So why would Rabbi Yehuda insist on this minimum if that's not the custom of the wife's family? Could have a difference in the families. Could have Ashkenazim and Sephardim in one marriage, right? If it's his custom and not her custom, so then Tanakhama Savar Kimin Ola Imo Ve'eno Yeredas Imo Hanimili Chaim. So the Tanakhama says, okay. So when we talked about she has to be, if she marries up, excuse me, then she has to be treated with the greater respect. But she doesn't go down. Like if she marries down, then she still has to be treated with her respect. So that would imply that you have to go by the minimum, right? If it's the husband's minimum standard is greater than her family's standard, then she married him, so she's entitled to the higher standard of treatment. But
talking about social economic standard.
Yes, right.
Works that way today?
Yeah, right. Right. So now we're trying to apply that to the funeral details, right? So does that we could say that, yeah, that applies to whatever, things during her lifetime she has to be treated according to the husband's station. But maybe in death, maybe it doesn't apply. Maybe this climbing the social ladder doesn't apply anymore. But Rabbi Yehuda says no, it applies even after she's dead. Even for the funeral, it's still, you have to go by the higher level of the husband's standards.
I mean, there's the whole thing of Ketubot HaMet. I mean, we treat them like, they don't go down like as soon as they die, right? I mean,
well, I would venture to say that this is a different thing than Ketubot HaMet. Ketubot HaMet is how you treat the body, right? Not the ceremony surrounding the funeral. I think maybe that could be a different thing.
I don't know.
You buy it?
No.
Okay.
I think the Ketubot HaMet.
That's all I got. That's all I got.
It's not just the body; it's the whole thing. It's the hesped. It's it's respect.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Good try.
Well, it's not like you're not respect. I mean, if look, in her family, the custom was not to have flautists and dirgers. So that means, that doesn't mean that they're not honoring the dead. They just had different ways of doing it. You buy that one?
No, because they're pointing it out right, like at the funeral. They're pointing out, she was really a poor.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You have a good point. So you would side with Rabbi Yehuda?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I'm Rav Chisda Amar Ukva. Rav Chisda said halacha Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Chisda goes with Hanan. Okay. Rav Chisda also said, Misha Nishtata, a person goes insane, right? He's not competent anymore. But he has a wife and children he has to feed, right? Based in Yardin L'Nachasav, Vizanin Mafarnasin Ishto Uvanav Uvnosav, Vidavar Acher. So the court can basically confiscate his, from his, I wouldn't say estate because he's not dead, but from his property, from his holdings, in order to provide sustenance for his family and for his wife, his sons and daughters, and another thing. We'll see what another thing is in a minute. Amrle Ravina Rashi. Ravina said, how is this different than we have a Bryce already? Bryce says, a person goes overseas. He didn't leave enough in the checking account. His wife has no access to funds. Based in Yerdlin Chasav, so the court can raid his bank account, his assets, and feed his wife. But that Brisa says not his children, and not this other thing. Again, we're going to see what the other thing is in a minute. So how is that, like, why is it different if the guy is incompetent, or if he is absent overseas? What? Don't you know that there's a difference between somebody who deliberately neglects his responsibilities and one who does it not deliberately? So the guy who loses his mind, obviously it's not his choice, right? It's unfortunate. We can assume that this is what he wanted, right? That if I should go nuts, if I should fail to provide for my children, my assets should be used. We can make that assumption. However, a person who leaves town and doesn't leave his wife any money, maybe that's what he wanted to do. So he has a legal responsibility to provide for his wife. That's in the Ketubot. That's the basis of the marriage. But when it comes to his children, the level of his responsibility is not enshrined that greatly, even though that seems shocking. But this is but his property rights supersede his, I guess you would say, his moral obligation. So the court can't confiscate his property. Now,
so that they don't have anything like like we have, like if you're failing to provide for your kids, they can take the kids away and
Right. Well, here the guy is absent, so this is nothing to take away. And I mean, we're not going to let the children starve. Then they would basically be wards of the state. They would be dependent on the public purse. But we don't have the court doesn't have the ability or the right to confiscate money from this guy, even though he's being a jerk. My davaracher. So what is this other thing that we've been talking about that he's responsible for? Rav Amar is Tachi. We're talking about jewelry. Rav Yosef Amar tzedakah. We're talking about his charitable funds that has to continue. We should continue funding his charitable endeavors. And if you say that that you can confiscate money for the wife's jewelry, so certainly you would say also for charity. But if you say that the other thing is charity, which is of course a mitzvah, then sorry, am I saying it backwards? We're talking about what you don't pay for, right? If you say what you don't pay for when the guy is overseas is jewelry, then certainly you wouldn't pay for charity, because that's like outside the family. So if you're going to say that he didn't intend, or that we're not permitted to confiscate his property to buy his wife some nice jewelry, so certainly you would say we are not entitled to use his property to give to charity. But the other way around, if you would say that what we're not entitled to is charity, okay, charity to third parties, fine, we're not going to confiscate his property. But you could say still that within the family, for the wife to have jewelry, we would assume that he wants that, because he looks bad, right? If she is not presentable, then and maybe we're not talking about diamond rings here, maybe we're just talking about kind of basic cosmetics or something. If she's not presentable, then it reflects badly on him. So we would assume that even if he didn't leave instructions, he would not want her to reflect badly on him while he's away, and so you could say that the court would that's the davar. Sorry,
funded.
Yeah. Amar Rav Chia bar Avin, Amar Rav Huna. Rav Chia said, "Misha halachon yisayim u'meisa ishto." Person who goes overseas and his wife dies. Basically, yardlin l'chasav v'kovrin osa lefi kvoda. Who's paying for the funeral? So the court can use his assets to pay for the funeral. So according to his station, right? So now this implies lefi kvoda. Going back to the discussion we had before, if they're from two different stations in life, then whose station do you follow in terms of funding the funeral procession? So this one says, this source seems to say lefi kavodo, according to his station and not hers. Mar says, Ema aflafi kavado. Now, what it means to say is even if his standard is higher, we go to his standard, but we certainly, the minimum would be her standard. This reinforces what we said before, that she marries up, then her status is elevated. If she marries down, her status is not degraded. Even after death. Okay. Amar of Masna. Masna says, a person says, I'm going overseas. If my wife dies, we're not using my money to bury her. Show me one. So you have to abide by that. Maishnaki Amar, what's the difference? Like, why before we said if he didn't leave instructions, we do take his property. So if he did say that no, that I don't want this, the nafle nichse kameyasme, because it's not there's another interested party here now. There's the orphans, right? So presumably what he's saying is, look, I have a limited estate. I don't want the money to be spent on the funeral. I want the money to go to the children, right? Okay, well, so that we understand, but kilo armaname nichse kameyasme ramu. So why wouldn't you apply the same thing and assume that that's what he wants if he did not leave instructions? Ella, so we're going to reread it. Ha'omer imeshu lotik baruhu minachasaf. What he's saying is, if I die, right, then don't use the money for my property. In other words, I'd rather my family get the money rather than spend on a nice funeral. Ain shamin lo, then you don't listen to him, because person should get a proper burial. Lav kol imenu sheyashir es banav v'yapil atzmo etzibur. Because look, if he doesn't agree to pay for his own funeral, well, somebody's got to bury him, right? The Hebrew Free Burial Society is going to step in. That's public funds. So we're not going to accept this idea that you keep your money in your family and rely on public funds for your needs. That's not acceptable. Okay. Next Mishnah. Leolam here b'shus ha'av ashatikanes l'shus ha'bal l'nesuin. So a woman is, before she's married, she's in her father's domain, and the Mishnah is saying that she stays there. And the Gemara will focus on the word la'olam, which is kind of I don't know how to describe that. It could mean forever, it could mean always, it could mean in all cases. Probably, I mean, in this context, it seems to me like for every purpose. Okay, but she's totally, let's say she's totally in the domain of her father until she enters the domain of her husband with nisuin, with the full marriage. What happens if we're using agents, excuse me, to affect the marriage? So the husband sends an agent from out of town, right? And he sends somebody to collect his bride, okay? And the father hands her over. That affects, she's, even though the nisuin hasn't taken place in the sense of he hasn't brought her home, they haven't slept together, lived together. Nonetheless, once the father hands her over to the agent, she's now considered to be in the domain of the husband. But if the father accompanies the agents, so he's still with the daughter, or he sends other agents to accompany the husband's agents, so we got a whole party going on. So he hasn't relinquished his daughter yet. She's still, until the nisuin is complete, she's still in the father's domain. But once they get to, they get halfway, and then the father's agents say, that's it, we have to turn back. We're leaving it to you to deliver her to the husband. Then then she is handed over, as it were. My liolam. So the first question Gemara says, what is this word liolam? Like totally. Lafu came in Mishnah Rishana. This actually is kind of pointedly excluding the earlier rule. It's not. What was the earlier rule? Higiyazman v'lo nisun. Let's say, the time came. In other words, I think the time limit we use is a year of engagement. Like if they've been engaged for a year and he still hasn't gone ahead and done the nisuin, so then the husband is henceforth responsible for her upkeep, right? Even though he hasn't done any suing, but he's had enough time to do whatever, to put together the funds, or for whatever reason he was delaying. It's enough. The time has come, and now she is within his domain in terms of being supported. And if he's a Kohen, she can eat truma as a member of his family. So Kamash Malan, so that was the original rule. Kamash Malan. So this mission is telling us that no, not so. Even after, even if the engagement stretches on and on, she's still in the father's domain until he does go ahead with the nisui.
So she doesn't get the truma.
And she does not get to eat truma until they actually complete the marriage, right?
So there's no time limit. He can
No
just
time limit. I mean, I don't know if there are other ways in which they encourage or try to force his hand.
She's kind of like an aguna. I mean, almost.
Yeah, I think the assumption is that he's trying to put together the funds, to.
Well, he should have thought of that before they did it.
Yeah, maybe his family got caught in the Ponzi scheme. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it does seem like there should be a limit. So I don't know why.
We don't learn it here.
Yeah, I don't know why the rule changed, right? Because that was the original rule seems logical.
What's the original rule again? 1 year?
It doesn't state that here, but I believe that's the case. Okay.
Yeah, right. If he decides he doesn't want to go through with it, he has to give her a get, right?
I guess, but she has to demand it, right? If she's okay with the situation, fine. The only question is who's paying for her upkeep.
Well, her father is, right? She's still in her father's house, right?
Well, that's the thing. That's what we're discussing. So according to the original rule, after a year, the husband took over the responsibility, even if the nisuin hadn't taken place. According to this Mishnah, it remains the father's responsibility until the nisuin takes place.
That's
the father
another
can't
problem.
afford it.
Yeah, that's another problem.
Well, that in any case, if the family has no money, so then it's a charitable case. But the question is, can you force the prospective husband to pay? And here we're saying no. That they would actually
difficult situation if she's still in her father's home, but he has to pay all the
that's right. That's an accounting challenge.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Next part of the Mishnah was Masar Av L'Shluchei Abal, Hari Rishus Abal. If the father hands her over to the agents of the husband, then she's considered in the domain of the husband. Amarav Misirasa Lakol Chutz Mitruma. We're talking about everything except for eating truma. For eating truma, she has to wait until the actual nisuin. Ravasi Amar Afli Truma. Ravasi says no, we don't distinguish it. Once she's been handed over, she can eat truma. Again, of course, if the husband is a kohen. Aser Ravun Ravasi, Ravun asked Ravasi or something was Ravkia's question. So our Mishnah said Leolam. Another Bryce says Leolam he Rishusa of Ashatikanis L'chupa. The rule is there doesn't seem to be an exception for truma. Where do you get this truma exception? Rav answered, Lava Minulchu Lo Tezlu Basar. Haven't I already told you? Don't like rely on things that can be things that are not explicit, things that you could explain in different ways. I could answer as follows. It could be that, it's true that she is completely, that she has to be, enter the chuppah. In other words, the marriage has to be complete in order for her to eat truma. And what we're saying here is that handing her over to the agents of the husband is considered like a chuppah. That's all. So that's it's kind of tautological, really. Shmuel Amar Lirushasa. Shmuel says that in what sense is she in the husband's domain? Only with regard to inheriting property. In other words, if she were to die, not if she were to die, if she were to come into an inheritance, the husband would be entitled to she would keep that. If she were to die, then the husband would be the inheritor and not the father. but not for these other purposes of mazanos, of sustenance and eating truma. So Shmuel says that what we're talking about in the first place is just who gets to inherit her property on her death.
So the case is she's on the way to the chuppah.
Right.
That's the case.
Yeah.
The husband's got his agents to come get her out of her father's house. They're on the way to the chuppah. She's out.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like delivery. It's like once you put the letter in the mailbox,
Yeah. Right.
it's considered in the possession of.
Yeah. Good analogy. Yeah. Reish Lakish Amar Subasa. Reish Lakish says no. In what sense has she entered the husband's domain with regard to the ketubah? Ketubasa mai. What do you mean? Di mesa yarisa. Well, what does that mean? Like, if you mean that if she dies, then the husband inherits her property, Hainu de Shmuel. That's what Shmuel just said. So what is Reish Lakish saying this different? Ravina Lomar Subasa me achar mana. What he's saying is that if so you know that the ketubah of a previously unmarried woman is $200. I say dollars, whatever, just in the vernacular, and a previously married woman is $100. Okay, so what Reish Lakish is saying is, in a future, let's say for whatever reason, she's been handed over to the agents, and before she gets there, the match breaks up. Maybe he dies, maybe he changes, somebody changes their mind. Okay, so now she gets married to somebody else in the end, right? Is she considered a first-time marriage or a second time? So what Reish Lakish is saying is, if she had been handed over by the father to the agents of the first almost husband, then she's considered a second-time marriage next time.
Even if she's a virgin.
Right.
Right. I mean.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the case would have to be either the husband dies, or he gives her a get.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Chanina Rabbi Tarvayu, Nesirasal Akol Afla Truma. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Chanina both said that when he hands her over to the agents, it's effective for everything, even eating truma. Meisvei, here is a question. If the father went, this was in our Mishnah, if the father accompanied the agents of the husband, or he sent his own agents along with the husband's agents, or if there was a like a motel along the way, and they stayed in the motel together. Not that they had sex, right? So there was no nisuin here, but they stayed in the same inn. Afal pi sheksubasa beves bala, even though even if the dowry has already been handed over. So in other words, not only did they stay in the same inn, but the dowry has already been paid. You would think that, this is like pretty much like they're already married, but Mesa Avia Yarsha. This source says, this Brisa says, that if she dies, the inheritance goes to her father, meaning that these circumstances are not quite enough to affect, to be considered a full marriage. And furthermore, Masar Avlu Shulchi Abal, if the father handed her over to the agents of the husband, or the father's agents handed her over to the husband's agents, or if there was an inn on the way and they stayed there together for the purpose of completing the marriage, that is considered a full marriage, not surprisingly, even if the dowry hasn't been paid yet. If she dies, the husband inherits. Right. So what are we focusing on in this source? The inheritance. But it implies that that's as far as the inheritance goes, but as far as eating truma, that is more stringent, and we wait until they get, the dowry is paid, They move in together,
The whole
right?
thing is done.
Right. So Tushta the Kulu. So this source is not reflected in any of the previous versions that we saw or opinions that we saw, right? That it's so Gemara says, yeah, Tufta, indeed, this is a source that is that's another opinion, right? It refutes all the others. Gemara says, wait, Agufa Kasha, wait, this is a self-contradictory. Amarta nitnasaim ololin. You said that she went into the motel to stay over. Tama de lolin. Hastama l'shem nisuin. So if it's explicit that like we're staying in this motel, but we have separate rooms, right? So if it's explicitly stated that we're having separate rooms, that this is not this is only because we need a place to spend the night and not because this is constituting the marriage. Hastama l'shem nisuin. So that implies that if they didn't say anything, if they just kind of went into the inn. And like, I don't know, maybe the separate rooms thing was not like, I don't know what the circumstances are. Is this maybe like dormitory style or something? I don't know. But sama, meaning that it's not explicit that they're doing this not for the sake of affecting the marriage. But Ema Seifa, but if we look at the end of the Mishnah, if they specifically say we want the bridal suite, right? Then, but if they didn't specify that, then we would assume that the unstated case would be that it's not for the purpose of marriage. So which is it? Like, the source is stating two opposite possibilities, but it doesn't say like what if neither one were specified. What's the middle? What's the unspecified case? Do we consider that for marriage or not for marriage? Ravashi answers, stame katane.
It's not specified.
Yeah. Let's try to translate this. Let's see. The Tana taught the halacha of entering one type of courtyard without specification, and the halacha of entering a different type of courtyard without specification. Oh, so there's two kinds of stuff, right? In other words, there's two kinds of unspecified cases. It depends on the nature of the place, right, of the hotel. Stam chaser dida lalin. If it's his courtyard, right? I don't know if he's the owner of Motel 6, then without specifying. Then the stam would be, this is just staying over. This isn't for marriage. The stam sorry, that's if she is. If it's her place, if she's paying the hotel bill, right? Then we're going to assume that unless otherwise specified, this is not a marriage thing. If he's paying the hotel bill, then we're going to say unless otherwise specified, it's a marriage thing. Okay.
I don't understand what he's doing here. I mean, he sent his agents, right, to get her. Why is he there? Shouldn't he be waiting for her? Like, I thought they're supposed to she's supposed,
I was wondering the same thing, but I imagine that
days you don't see the kala, it's not supposed to see her for a few days before, probably exactly to avoid this situation,
Yeah, well, I guess that he's bringing along the agents for the specific purpose of not taking her into his domain yet until they get back to his town and they have the formal wedding or something.
But if he sleeps with her, then guess what?
Right. So no, none of these things are saying that they slept together in the sense of having sex. Really?
But we're presuming that, isn't it?
No, I don't think so. I think it's the question of they're staying in the same motel. If they had sex, then for sure, that affects marriage. I'm sorry?
What does it mean Nisuin then?
For the purpose of Nisuin, because how do you affect the Nisuin? Like that's the symbolic purpose of the chuppah, right? I'm taking you into my home.
Right.
I
see.
Yeah.
But I thought they were on the way to the wedding or something, or maybe that is the wedding or something. I don't.
Well, the idea is that once he takes her into his home, and if he's paying the hotel bill, then it's his home.
They're married.
Yeah, exactly.
I see, okay.
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 Tana. What happens if the father hands her over to the husband's agents and then she sleeps with somebody else? So she's subject to the death penalty, and we use the death penalty of choking. All right. So what's the difference? Like there's two possible outcomes here in terms of the death penalty. One is chanek or choking. That is the punishment for a fully married woman who commits adultery, but an engaged woman who commits adultery, that would be a different death sentence of skila, of stoning. Right. So this one is saying that once the father hands her over to the agents of the husband, she is subject to the punishment of a married woman, of choking. What's the source? Ami Bar Chama. Rami says, Amar Kra. The Torah says, "Liznos be'savia." That this is a rule for somebody who commits adultery in her father's house. She's not in her father's house anymore. He's already gotten rid of her, as it were. He's already sent her away with the agents of the husband. So therefore, even though they're not fully married yet, she's not in her father's house, and that's why she gets she's subject to the punishment of a married woman. But couldn't you say differently? Maybe by saying in her father's house would include somebody who maybe it means that she's still a virgin. She hasn't had sex with them, even if they've had the wedding and she's entered his home. They haven't had sex yet, and then she sleeps with somebody else. Maybe that's what it's excluding. Like now she's out of her father's house. Maybe when she's still on the way with the agents, she's still considered in her father's house. Morava, Ami told me, Chupa behed yaksiva. We have a different verse to exclude that. Ki yenara basula marasal ish. When you have this is the chapter of and she sleeps with somebody else, so she gets the death penalty. So Nara Velobogaris, talking about a Nara, a young woman, not a older woman. Basula Velobula, a virgin, and not if she's already if she's a non-virgin, and Marasa Velonasua, the word engaged and not married. That's when you get the chanek punishment. That's when you get the stoning punishment rather than the choking. So my nesua, what do we mean by fully married? Nesua. Ilay nesua mamish, we're talking about a full marriage. I know basula v'lo bu'ula, right? That's the same as saying she's not a virgin anymore, right? In other words, she slept with the husband. That's the full marriage. So what are we talking about excluding? They've had the ceremony. She's moved in with him, but they haven't slept together yet. But what about a case where she maybe it's maybe the case of like where she's partly in her father's house is when she got married, but then she moved back to her father's house. Hadra Milsa Kamai. So maybe she goes back to being, her father's daughter, and she's no longer considered married in terms of the death penalty punishment. This we already had dealt with Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel taught. This is a bit of a long piece here.
We're on the next stuff now.
Yeah. Now we'll go a little further. What time is it? Yeah, if it's okay with you, we'll just go till we get to a break. The Tan of Rabbi Shmuel taught. when a woman who's a widow or divorcee makes a neder, a vow, then there's no way out of it. Like she can't have it annulled by her father or her husband because she's not married anymore. This is obvious. She's not. She's already left her father's house, gotten married, and now she's not married anymore. So of course, who else is going to annul it? So what is the Torah talking about when she was handed over to the husband's agents? Or his agents handed over to the husband's agents, and then then he dies, so the husband dies or divorces her. They had never gotten married fully. So whose domain is she in with regarding Nadari, with regarding vows? She's not completely in her husband. She hasn't completely left her father. Once she's left the father's domain, like even if the husband dies, even if she doesn't actually get married, he's out of the picture. He's no longer a qualified annuller of her vows. Okay, let's stop here. I think Amarav Papa.
Good.
Fear is the father.
Say again.
The father can't.
Yeah. He's no longer once she left him, on her journey to marriage, even if that never actually completed, he's
Right.
already, with regarding the Darim, she's already left his domain and is no longer no longer in his domain for purposes of annulling vows.
Right. So
Okay.
Right. Okay. So she's in a no man's land. She hasn't entered her husband's town, but she has.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, she's responsible for her own. There's nobody who can know. Just like a man can't have his vows annulled, and a widow from a full marriage can't have her vows annulled.
Right.
I mean, there is the other route of getting it abrogated by court or whatever. Yeah, that's a separate issue. But just the kind of the full right to just say I don't accept that vow. You're released from that vow. That is the domain of the husband or the father, depending on.
Thank you, Dov.
Have a good day. Hello.
Hello, good morning, sir. Louis.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Sir, I wanted to know, maybe you have time today to show me the job.
Yes. This morning I have time. I'll be home till. I'm out right now. I'll be home in about 10 minutes, and then I'll be home till around 1:30.
Yeah. So when you here, you can call me. I'm over here.
Oh, okay. Good.
All
You're
right.
there now?
Thank
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.